For customers who have invested in Salesforce Field Service and Salesforce Billing and are looking for a seamless way to generate sales order from a completed field service work order, this connector from Salesforce Labs helps achieve just that. Let's take a closer look at the object model. Work order lines, products consumed, expenses are all related to work order, which are all the Salesforce Field Service objects. Typically, the status field on the work order is used to indicate the completion of a professional service offering. Once a work order is completed, the next step in the lead to cash business process is the generation of a sales order and bill the customer. This is where the connector comes in handy. The connector can be configured to either on demand or automatically generate order and order products within Salesforce. This can also be configured to ensure that invoice and invoice line items are generated upon the creation of order and order products. Again, we have a couple of options here. We can use the Salesforce billings functionality to generate the invoice at a later point in time, or configure this connector to ensure that invoices are also generated along with orders. If we talk about the end-to-end business process, again, once a sales order is generated, is where Salesforce billing can be used to add taxes on the order products to determine the estimated tax. Taxes can be applied on the invoice line items to determine the actual tax. Now, depending on what functionalities have been adopted in Salesforce billing, we can have payments management, revenue recognition, dunning and collections all be configured within Salesforce billing, or optionally have the sales order and invoice details sent to an ERP where the downstream functionality can be achieved. Now let's see this basic functionality of this connector in action now. On the App Exchange, we will find the Salesforce Field Service and Billing connector, which is a value-added free bolt-on made available to us by Salesforce Labs. This can be installed and configured to ensure either on-demand or automated creation of sales order and an invoice within Salesforce. The first use case we will review is the ability to create a sales order on demand from a completed work order. Work order 22 details the service performed by a service engineer to the customer cadence-centric on 4th November. Since the hourly rate of the service engineer was set to $100, and since the work was performed over a period of 4 hours, the total amount charged to the customer is $400. The next step in this process is to generate the sales order. As part of the installation and configuration of the connector, I have added the Create Sales Order and Create Invoice buttons on the work order page layouts. We will now see how a sales order is created upon invoking the Create Sales Order button. As we can see, a sales order has now been created. The details from the work order, such as the account name, the order start date, as well as the order amount, have all been carried forward. We also see a reference to the work order that's made available, as well as the description and other details carried forward. We also see that the order product has been created with the work order line item for the service engineer, the quantity, and the total price of $400. Typically, this can be used if there are additional processes to be performed after an order is created before they can be activated and invoiced. The next use case we will see is the on-demand creation of a sales order as well as an invoice from a work order. In order to achieve this functionality, I will invoke the Create Invoice for work order 23, which has similar details as of work order 22. When we invoke the Create Invoice, what happens behind the scenes is not only an invoice has been generated, but a Salesforce sales order has been created and activated, and a corresponding invoice has been generated. The bill to contact, the details have all been carried forward from the work orders. On the related list, we will also see an invoice line for the service engineer with the corresponding charges. This use case is helpful when we want to automatically create a sales order, activate it,
and immediately create an invoice for the customer. Finally, let's see the automated way to create a sales order and an invoice from a work order. When the package is installed, there are visual flows that are also made available. One of the flows, Field Service Billing Convert, accepts a couple of parameters and automatically creates the sales order and invoice. It accepts the order ID, which is a reference to the work order, as well as a boolean, which determines whether an invoice needs to be generated or not. I have created a process builder and I am sending the boolean value to true to indicate that an invoice also needs to be generated along with the work order. We will see this in action now, where we look at work order 24, which has once again very similar details to what we saw in 23 and 22. Now, instead of creating the sales order or the invoice through the on-demand buttons, I have configured the process builders to get triggered when the status of the work order is set to create sales order. So when I set this to create sales order and save this record, the process builder gets triggered, and in turn the flow gets triggered, and we see that the order has been generated for us automatically and activated, as well as an invoice has been generated for us and is currently in the draft status. There you have it. These are some of the ways in which you can generate a sales order and an invoice from work orders using this connector.